In this video, we're going to look at the great defense that Paul George played in Friday's loss. You can still have a bad shooting night and still make incredible contributions to the team. And that was the case for Paul George in this game. He finished with 6 steals, which obviously is the number that jumps off the page. But when going through the actual defensive film of his night, he was really good. And he's had a really good start to the season defensively, almost back to where he was a couple years ago. Here, he tags through and touches the cutter, making sure he gets a hand on him before Utah goes into their full set. And he's going to end up ball denying Donovan Mitchell here, which forces the ball to Derek Favors. But as Ingles lobs it, Paul George hangs in the passing lane and gets a hand on it and forces the first of his 6 steals for the evening. You know, even on offensive sets where the opposition actually makes the shot, you can still play great defense. And Paul George displays that on this play here. As the ball gets worked around into a pick and roll between Conley and Favors, we're going to end up seeing Paul George dig down to protect against the Favors roll, which kind of mucks up Utah's offense on this play. The ball is then going to get swung all the way to Joe Ingles on the weak side as we see Paul George anchored at the nail. And as the ball goes to Ingles and he cuts and drives hard against the closeout by Luke Kennard, the video freezes and we can see Paul George with his hand into a passing lane for Favors, but he cuts back out to Jordan Clarkson. He gets a really nice contest on this. It's a 31% shot probability. The shot goes in, but this is fantastic team defense. Paul George is so good at playing passing lanes and using his length to disrupt what an offense wants to do. Here we see Utah run a 2-5 pick and roll, and the Clippers switch it with their 2 best wing defenders, George and Leonard. It's actually incredible to see unfold in real time and watch again on a replay. As Conley drives, George is going to dig down onto Gobert and get his hand right into the passing lane to force the steal. This is fantastic help side defense by Paul George, and he creates a turnover because of his smarts. This is a baseline out of bounds set for the Utah Jazz. And on this play, all you need to do is watch where Paul George is as the low man defensively in the pick and roll that Utah runs here. The low man's responsibilities are to dig down on the roll, but still stay connected enough to the weak side corner in order to play basically 2 passing lanes at one time. And right here, as we freeze it, you can actually see Paul George. He instinctively steps out of the paint to not get a defensive 3. Here comes the Favors roll. George reads this pass from Mitchell to the weak side corner, Royce O'Neal, and he jumps right into the passing lane and gets yet another steal. Paul George really is an incredible defender when he turns it on. We come into the middle of this play, and we're going to actually see what Paul George can do, primarily matched up one-on-one against Donovan Mitchell. Here, he gets caught a little bit out of position by Jordan Clarkson and tries to jump a pass back to the top, but instead Mitchell's flaring to the wing. But George does a really good job here of not falling for the Mitchell pump fake and fully leaving his feet, and he ends up staying stride for stride with Mitchell on this little drive attempt. And as Mitchell goes to drive, George does a really good job of walling him off with his body in legal guarding position and gets his hand on the ball right here as Mitchell brings it up to force the pass and the ball away from Mitchell's hands, and the Clippers get another stop and a steal. Baseline out of bounds for Utah. It's going to be a quick little set to try to get Mike Conley open for 3, and as he goes into this handoff with Derek Favors, Paul George points to Ibaka to switch on this, but Ibaka doesn't, which forces George to go into the screen of Favors and contest this Conley shot so well that he ends up blocking it and getting the Clippers a stop on a nice set for Utah. Paul George is so freaking good at digging down to help while still playing a passing lane and using his length to disrupt things for offenses. And on this play, as Donovan Mitchell goes into a pick and roll with Joe Ingles and gets a little bit downhill towards the paint, we see Paul George dig down off the weak side corner, but stay just enough in the passing lane to leap and get a hand on this pass to Bogdanovich in the corner, and then he ends up getting another steal. This is the final play, and as I said at the outset of the video, you can have a poor shooting night and still make an impact. Here, Paul George digs down on the Mitchell drive and gets back out to Royce O'Neal on the pass in order to make sure O'Neal doesn't get a nice free and easy shot. They then run a little screen action, but the Clippers switch this, so we get Paul George on Donovan Mitchell. Paul George, like I said, not shooting well in this game, but still doing the little things to help the Clippers get back in this game, in a game that they ended up losing. As the ball comes back around to Royce O'Neal, Paul George gets into good, solid defensive position against Donovan Mitchell in the corner. It's late in the shot clock, and Mitchell's going to go up with this shot. It's going to be a 31% shot probability because of Paul George's excellent contest. Mitchell misses, and the Clippers get a stop due to Paul George's defense.